Phone, stop vibrating. Stop blowing up. We're recording an episode of the Mixed Reviews.
God, Gavin, you're so unprofessional.
Popular? Did you say the word popular wrong? I'm so popular.
Right. I'm so sorry. I'm just so confused.
Welcome to the Mixed Reviews. I'm Gavin.
Hi, and I'm Louie.
And this is a podcast where we take a actress, actor, filmmaker, sometimes film companies, and we dissect them.
Not frogs.
Film stuff. And, so if this is your first time listening, thanks for listening. And,
welcome.
We're going to do something different this week, but before we get to that, we got some old business to take care of. We do have
old business. Okay, and first of all, I can't believe I almost forgot. We got quite a bit of, I would say maybe blowback.
I liked the person who I'm been trying to get comments on our show for a while anyways. So.
So last week we talked about Pixar and, maybe didn't say the kindest things about the movie Brave. And,
I like to think that I said some nice things, maybe.
Yeah. Which is funny because I feel like every episode I'm the one who is, a lot more gentler in our critiques.
But I've always found you very gentle.
Thank
Louie.
you so much. That's what I'm going for. But yeah, so, thanks for everyone who got back to us. Brave, you have stans, so congratulations. I still don't like you. So here's our poll we ran. Oh, why internet?
We ran our poll on @themixedreviews, which you can find on Twitter. Did you pull it up yet?
I did pull it up. Okay,
excellent.
And this is the first. We have a tie. And literally we have a first place and a second place because both Ratatouille and The Incredibles came in at 21%, and WALL-E and Toy Story came in at 29%. And it was funny because literally the movies were like going backward and forward all the entire week. I was like, okay, yeah. Incredibles coming like strong out of nowhere.
I was really excited at one point because WALL-E had like a big lead, and I was just like, yes, my WALL-E stands.
No.
But literally every person I talked to, which by the way, if you're my friend and you're not listening to this, I'm shading you right now because you need to start listening to this podcast.
Trade.
But I talked to a lot of people and I was like, oh, my pick was WALL-E, and everybody was like, not The Incredibles? I would have thought The Incredibles for you. And I'm like, I am not a one-dimensional creature.
You have lots of layers.
I do. And I'm currently wearing the superheroes on my shirt right now.
So...
but yeah, I was super happy that WALL-E... You know what I actually loved about this poll is just that people are so passionate in general about... Pixar that that it was two ties.
It literally shows, all of these, and even in these, top, I chose, The Incredibles was the, I guess, outlier from,
right.
I was like, what do I fill in this fourth slot with?
And that's the other thing about Pixar is it could have been, except for, maybe 2 or 3 movies, it could have been any of it.
Right.
You could have put Monsters, Inc. in there.
Yeah.
You could have put Finding Nemo in there.
Yeah. A lot of people were like, I can't believe you didn't put Up in there, and I was like, well...
I actually cut our discussion about Up out of the episode, but yeah.
Oh, well... Yeah, we didn't like it as much as everyone else liked it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, so that's great. What are we mixing this week, Gavin?
So, and by the way, once again, just in case you didn't hear it, you can find those polls on the Mixed Reviews on Twitter. I'm just trying to social media push. Mm-hmm. I don't want to threaten you guys into doing it, but I want to push you towards it.
He's a pusher. He pushes things. Anyone get that reference? Tell me later. Thanks.
So this week we're actually doing our first, and this was mine. I pushed us towards this.
Pushing.
I'm pushing. Lots of pushing. I wanted to try doing somebody who was no longer with us, who'd had a very long career. So this is our first chance to sort of delve into Hollywood royalty.
Yes.
And this week we're doing
Joan Crawford.
Royalty,
the actual Queen Bee.
Yes, the Queen Bee. Exactly.
Not Beyonce. I don't want any Beyonce stans coming after us. They will ruin us, end us.
That's true. If there's one person in the media that has the power to take us down, it's Beyonce.
Yeah.
Everybody else, nope.
Untouchable. Can't touch this. I regret saying that.
Yeah.
I regret saying that immediately.
I can't cut it out either now.
Gavin, save me.
But I think we should head into our rewind and find out a little bit more about Joan Crawford.
Right, great. So I went straight to the source for all things Texan, TexasMonthly.com.
Excellent.
And found their Texas encyclopedia, the Texopedia, if you will.
Ooh, I like that.
And pulled up Miss Joan Crawford because if you didn't know, she was born in San Antonio, Texas.
Yeah, she was.
And I have all my notes here. Hold on. Hold the phone. She was born Lucille Fay Lesueur.
Which is a beautiful name, so.
It is. It's very elegant, I think. What's crazy is, like, right off the bat, there's dramatics.
Yeah.
No one really knows when she was born. It's like 1904, 1906.
That's the kind of glamour I aspire to.
Right.
Was Gavin born in 1983? Was he born in 1993?
Who knows?
No one will know. I could have been born yesterday. That's how beautiful and flawless the skin may be.
Correct. So literally on their website, it says she preferred the year 1908. And I love that.
She preferred that people knew she was born in 22.
Yeah, exactly.
3 years before her first film.
She moved to Oklahoma. Her dad, like, abandoned the family pretty, quickly. So they moved to Oklahoma with a new stepdad. She had some, like, dark, troubled times. A lot of Joan Crawford is, like, she was, like, the girl who came from nothing.
Yeah.
Her stepdad, who she didn't know was not her real father, he sexually, was assaulting her when she was 11. They eventually moved to Kansas City. But she always knew she wanted to be an actress and a dancer. She really didn't.
She's the original Ivy Lynn. That's for all you Smash stands out there.
Oh my God, Ale, I hate that. I hate that. I was at a place in my life where I didn't even get that reference until you said Smash, and I was like, no!
Put down the chair, Louie.
She did not go to school after elementary school. She didn't get a formal education. And I saw an interview where she says one of her great regrets in life was not, getting an actual education. So she started dancing in, like, theaters.
Yeah.
And she was discovered by a producer in Detroit and started putting her in, little song and dance thingamabobs. And so
she could dance too.
Girl could dance.
If you go online and put in your little Google machine, it'll find a YouTube clip for this movie she did called Dance Girl Dance, and she can cut a rug.
And she can dance, girl.
Yeah,
dance. In 1925, MGM Studios made her instantly famous. They offered $500 to the fan who submitted the best new name for the studio starlet. Apparently, she says in interviews that they thought her name was too long for the marquee.
How did you hit upon the name Joan Crawford?
I didn't. They had a contest in a magazine, Photoplay magazine, I think it was, and the first choice was Joan Arden. So I did two pictures, Arden.
Arden.
A-R-D-E-N, like Elizabeth. And so I did two pictures under the name of Joan Arden, and a Joan Arden, an extra girl, sued Metro. Mm-hmm. So they took second choice, Joan Crawford. And I said, whew, sounds like crawfish. And Billy Haynes, my best friend, said, better crawfish than cranberry. It's served with turkeys. I hope you never make one.
And yet, it stuck. She was, she was only 5'3", which is a fun fact.
Yeah, which is crazy because you look at her in movies and you do not think she's a short woman
she's
at all.
Like dominating everything. One of the things like that's immediately recognizable about her is her huge shoulders. Apparently her shoulders are so wide that a studio courtier, a designer.
There you go.
Despairing of reducing them, decided to exaggerate them instead because it was just too much work to like hide her shoulders, and so her padded shoulders became her fashion trademark.
How did you come to get the part of Mildred Pierce?
Well, I think God had his hand on my shoulder because Mr. Mike Curtiz hated me. He wanted Barbara Stanwyck. He wanted no part of me. He said, I don't want those big, broad shoulders. She wears padded shoulders. And I said, well, so I went to Sears Roebuck. Oh, yes. And I bought off the rack 3 dresses to test in for just house dresses. Now, when I first started in pictures, Adrian said, I've never seen such big shoulders. She should be the female Johnny Weissmuller. So, Adrian said, I can't cut her shoulders off, so I'll just exaggerate them. So that's how the padded shoulders came in. So Microtis said, I hate those big shoulders. I hate them. I hate them. So one day while we were testing, he hated me so much, he said, I hate you. And he tore the dress off me. And thank God I had a bra on. He said, my God, they're hers. Not these.
She appeared in 82 movies, 23 of them were silents, including one in which she appeared nude.
Yes.
Called The Plumber. And apparently she later bought up almost every copy.
Yeah, well, you can't lose Crawford's out.
Well, I think I read on her Wikipedia, it says, like, when she was trying to finance her career, she was in, like, some softcore...
That's up to debate, and that's another bit of, like, the Joan Crawford mythos. There were a couple people who claimed to have stag films with her partaking in them, and they were able to hold them over her head later in her career, which really leads to the credibility of the fact that they existed.
Right.
But nobody really knows if they did or not, which is an interesting sort of, like, part of her...
Yeah, her legend.
Her legend, yeah.
I mean, we've all done a little bit of softcore porn. It's whatever.
Yeah.
It's whatever, Joan.
Yeah, softcore.
Yeah, softcore. Whatever. She was married 3 times. Wait, 3 times? 4 times. She was married 4 times.
Yes.
Her first 3 husbands...
I wasn't going to correct you. I was like, well, he's going to count them.
I'm going to get it. The first 3 were actors. Douglas Fairbanks Jr.
Yes.
How do you say his name? Franchot?
Franchot Tone?
Franchot Tone. Which literally sounds like a trombone.
Yeah. He's kind of a wet blanket. And he's in a bunch of movies with her. So.
And Philip Terry. Her 4th was Pepsi-Cola executive Alfred Steele.
Yes.
I like how here they say, whose product she habitually spiked and swilled.
Yeah.
Shade, but true. She starred in 8 movies with Clark Gable, more than any other leading man. They also had an off-screen romance. Her arch-rival, Bette Davis, once sniped that Crawford, quote, slept with every male star at MGM except Lassie. Bitch! Her legendary feud with Davis began in 1935 when Bette dallied with Franchot Tone. And Davis's 2 Oscars further enraged her.
Yeah.
Crawford got her revenge when she was signed by Warner Brothers, which was Davis's longtime studio. And then, of course, they later had Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, which is, kind of also the topical reason why we're talking about Joan, because not only Feud was a huge success, it got like 1 million Emmy nominations, Olivia de Havilland is now like out of her like hermitude to like comments, which is crazy. Thank you, Ryan Murphy, for like your mad bag idea of tricks.
I will never say thank you, Ryan Murphy. So you can go to hell, Ryan Murphy.
Well, first, I guess also like I did not see Feud.
Yeah, we can talk about it in the fast forward. I feel like that's a place to...
Great. So, yeah, Joan had a really hard time, I think, at the end of her career. There was a while where she was pegged as box office poison, and she had a really crazy life with her kids. She adopted her first 2 children while she was single, and then... did she adopt the twins also?
Yes. Yeah, she was the mother of 4 adopted. Yes.
Yeah. So she adopted all 4 of her kids. She was also she was known as a philanthropist, but she loved doing it on like the DL. She loved giving extravagant gifts to like every person on set all the time. And she loved being a star.
Yes.
I think there's a great quote that's like, no one made Joan Crawford a star. She made herself a star. She was like putting herself out there, going to Hollywood parties, showing off with her dancing skills that she could be a star. And really make a case for her as like someone who could carry a studio. She was with MGM for 17 years, something crazy like that. And she worked her ass off, essentially. Like she worked her ass off and she had a lot of fun doing it. And she took so much care and loved her fans so much. She, this is a completely different time, like, so when there was an opportunity for her to like go out and meet fans, she was out there doing it all the time. She was writing letters back to every single person.
Yeah, she handwrote so many letters.
She kept like files of everyone who like would write to her because that was her lifeblood. She lived for the applause.
You're a dead ringer for Joan Crawford.
Am I really?
Don't look now, but I am Joan Crawford.
Joan Crawford?
Yes. Oh, somebody get some water. Quick, he's fainted.
The thing that people tend to forget, especially nowadays, because it's not, that aspect of it is not as much as prevalent amongst celebrities nowadays, is, it's called show business for a reason.
Yeah.
And she was very, business minded.
Right.
She knew she needed to keep her name in lights. She knew she needed to keep her, her name on people's lips. And that's really how she was able to sort of spread her star around. And this is the other thing. Her first film was 1925. Her last film was 1970.
Yeah.
I mean, she had a 50-year movie career,
right,
which is unheard of.
Yeah. I mean, and especially when you think back in the day when it's even today, being a woman in Hollywood is fucking awful.
Yeah.
And so you imagine...
But back then you were essentially bought in contract form.
Right.
And you women especially, had to maintain certain weights and everything.
You bear up so well under it. How do you keep that eternal youth of yours?
I drink Pepsi.
Do you, besides Pepsi, have a special diet you follow?
No, I eat very well. I must tell you, Bill, that I do not eat large amounts, but I find that I must eat about every 3 hours to keep up the energy, and I always push it away when it tastes the best, so I don't gain weight, and I do get my energy without any worry about the weight.
I had a grandfather who said something like that to me one time. He said, learn to push yourself away from the table.
Mm-hmm. When it tastes the best.
What did you...
And I never eat desserts, too.
No desserts?
Never. I learned a long time ago when I had a lot of weight to lose. When I was 16, I was 145 pounds. And when I saw myself on the screen, I thought, oh, my goodness. So I learned at 16 and up through 18 to not like the things that were not good for me. And you can do that,
You can. You train yourself.
Yes, you just train yourself. Anything that isn't good for you, cut it out.
It didn't matter how good of an actress she was because she was a contract person. So they could turn her down based on looks alone.
Yeah, and she also, I think, worked very hard to prove that she was an actress. And it's crazy, though, because she definitely, on purpose, has built this persona, or she built that persona.
Yeah.
And she enjoyed fanning those flames. She was not above, I read something that she was at a premiere and she wanted to go out and see the fans, and they were like, you can't, you'll start a riot. And she was like, oh, I'll put on a disguise, it'll be fine. And she proceeded to put on an aggressively huge hat, a big brooch, a diamond brooch, huge glasses, just being the most ostentatious, ridiculous. And literally she stepped outside and 1 second later people were losing their goddamn minds. It's she knew what she was doing. And so she liked that type of attention and, the drama. She loved it, and it kept people talking and kind of the allure, the mystique of who Joan Crawford was. And still to this day, people are like, who was the real Joan Crawford,
Yeah. And that's one of the things I do want to, you brought up the kids, and I figure we'll just get this out of the way right now. We're here basically to, we give a background on the person. We're not here to judge their private lives. Obviously, one of the big things about Joan Crawford when you talk about her is you sort of have to talk about Mommy Dearest. And Mommy Dearest was a book her eldest daughter wrote after she had passed away about the abuse she suffered at the hands of Joan. And, it's horrifying and awful, and nobody should have to go through that. But also, we're not really here to discuss that.
Yeah,
so,
and it's weird.
But we can both admit, it's gross. It's bad that it happened.
It's super gross.
Yeah.
But it's also, I've read so many people, biographers have said, Christina, made up a lot of the things or exaggerated things. And I am not one to be a victim, not believing that at all. But it's depending on who you talk to in her personal life.
There's official biographers who say they don't believe it. There's official biographers who say they absolutely do believe it.
Right.
There was a huge split amongst the children. Christina and Christopher agreed. And they were older than the twins anyways. Mm-hmm. So, there's a good chance that if stuff happened, it occurred before the twins were in the household.
Their experiences were probably very different.
Were very different. Christina and Christopher claim many things happened, and the twins claim that they never saw anything like that. So,
and to be noted, Christina and Christopher were cut out of her will.
Right. And I'll talk a little bit more about the movie Mommy Dearest when we get to our fast forward, but the movie Mommy Dearest, even though it's based off the book, feels like with its final line that it's essentially saying maybe Christina's making it up, because she says like, you know, like, that's it, she's won, and her final line is she's like, maybe not yet, or something like that, and it feels like, oh, well, she's gonna write this for revenge.
Yeah.
And once again,
we don't know.
We don't know.
I
definitely not victim blaming Christina Crawford, because what she describes is horrible for any child to have gone through.
Right.
But I mean, it's a very sad portion of Joan Crawford's
right,
life
and it's also just like, it's crazy. This woman was so interesting and like layered, and you know, the claims of violence is horrifying. But then you hear about, you know, she left so much money to charities and was giving like all this philanthropy. She was also best friends with a lot of gay actors,
right,
and like held their cause close to her heart. And so yeah, she's a extensively interesting character, and I'm really glad we got into her this week, because I had only seen one of her movies before, The Women, and I saw it like in college and I loved it. But for a long time I thought like movies, like these old movies in the 20s and 30s were like inaccessible to me. Like I was like nervous to try to get in there. But they're so good.
Yeah.
They're so fun, and like there's movies just aren't made like this anymore. Not to say that all these are amazing, but like
yeah.
But like the writing and like the comedy and it's just like so like now it's like, oh, everything's so campy, or like it's campy, but like back then, like, this is so sincere, you know?
And I'm glad you had such a good experience, because I worried about this. I actually asked you on the walk over here if you'd seen many older films, because I was sort of the reverse. And this is going to sound silly. It's not meant to. As a colorblind American, as I like to say, black and white movies were incredibly accessible to me as a child, because I didn't have to worry or feel stupid if I didn't recognize, because part of me being colorblind is I have a tendency to ask, like, what color is that? You know, and that's not something everybody's used to in their normal life, because it's like, why did this kid learn his colors? So black and white movies have always been a big part of my life, because I could relate to them in a way that
you live life in black and white.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God. Wow.
But I could relate to them in a way that, like, perhaps, you know, other people weren't, you know, at such a young age, because I know so many people who think black and white instantly means boring. And, and it doesn't. It absolutely does not.
Yeah.
And there's so many, that's the other thing about Joan Crawford's career, is because she started in silent films. And, it's interesting to, like, watch the way her acting style changes. Silent films are very expressive, and a lot of big hand gestures, a lot of big like eyes, and she had a great face for it.
Oh my God.
But what's weird is in the 30s, her acting style went the other direction. She did a ton of pre-code movies, especially all the movies you mentioned with Clark Gable.
Yeah, and so pre-code movies were movies before that didn't have like a moral authority.
Prior to the Hays Code, which was implemented sort of like we have the MPAA nowadays. And we can get into that in another episode. If you guys are real confused about the Hays Code, feel free to drop us a message, reviewsmixed@gmail.com, or Mixed Reviews on Twitter, the Mixed Reviews on Twitter. But the Hays Code was there to sort of like, you know, like religious people couldn't be bad, and like, no one could be a sex worker, and nobody could do drugs, and nobody could swear, and nobody, and like women couldn't be like real sexual beings, and
it's like essentially like, you know, everything was pious, and like, you know, and so a lot of the movies, and you feel that, but the pre-code movies, it's like they're racier, they're edgier, and then when you get into the code movies, it's like
the late 30s, 40s, 50s, like
it all kind of, you're like, oh well, even all this tension and drama, you know, in the end, it has to go back to her being good,
right?
Or like, you know, there's a lot of these,
or she'll be punished for it. Right. That's the other thing. Like it's either like she has to end up being like a pious person during the Hays Code period, or she has to die,
or it's even like she's set up as a character who's like maybe bad in some way, but then like as the movie goes along, it's like surprise, in the end it was someone else, or like someone tricked her into duping it and she's been good this entire time, and I'm like, oh, well, that's boring, bye.
But yeah, so in the 30s, like her acting style got a lot smaller and a lot less expressive, and it was sort of interesting to watch, because that's not a time period in which there was a lot of small acting. You know, one of the things that made Bette Davis great is she had that sort of exaggerated, like everything was real dramatic to her, and it's interesting to see, because I hadn't realized that. I hadn't seen as many Joan Crawford movies as perhaps I thought I had. You know, you mentioned she did 83 films.
Right, yeah.
Which is crazy. And so it was interesting to see that. And then it was also interesting to see that in the 40s, she got a lot bigger again. And I think it was just because of the code, because of melodramas became really, really big. Noirs became really big post World War II in America, even though noirs existed prior to that. And if you go to film school and somebody says, "Oh, noirs were invented after World War II," the French were doing them way before.
You're a liar, Dina.
Exactly. So she's a really interesting person to watch, and to be able to see her career change as it goes, and sort of you know, how she performed in that.
Totally. She like lives, like there are certain modes that you'll find her in. In the early days, she's like the flapper girl. She was the flapper girl.
Absolutely.
And because she could dance, she was gorgeous. Seeing her on screen, it made me think like, oh, this is why Anne Hathaway is as famous and as popular as she is, because she has the great big mouth, the great expressive eyes. She's gorgeous, and she's the girl that you can like connect with. So she was the flapper girl. She was the girl from like Hardscrabble, nothing, trying to make her way up. She was, then she turned into the mom.
Yes.
And she's either...
And that started really early for her, actually.
And she was either like the pious, good, oh, I can't believe, whatever mom, or she was the bitch.
Yes.
Like the crazy mom, like unhinged. And then like in her later career, it turned into this full on...
Like camp.
Camp.
You know, there's a certain phrase that gets uttered, especially post Baby Jane, called hagsploitation.
Yeah.
And she became a big focus of that. She began working with William Castle, who's a really famous horror
didn't
director.
Baby Jane start that?
Yeah, so it's the impetus for hagsploitation.
Right.
And and so that sort of, her career didn't end on the highest of notes. But the fact that she kept working, I feel like, is really admirable regardless.
Yeah.
I mean, she was, at the time, she was also very much into alcohol, and it was not a good, you know, she retired, she became sort of a recluse about 7 years before she died, because she saw some really unflattering paparazzi photos of herself and decided she just didn't want to be in the public eye anymore.
Yeah. I think I saw one of her last interviews, and it's crazy because she was beautiful from like her entire career.
Yeah.
But you just know that she cared so much about the way she looked. And can you imagine like seeing a picture of yourself and being like, I'm never going outside again?
Yeah, exactly.
Bye.
I can actually imagine that. But anyway.
Too real, Gavin?
Yeah, exactly.
Too real?
I think it's time. But yeah, so that's Joan Crawford. We should move into our tops and our bottoms.
Okay, so I have my list. This is the most I've watched for any episode we've done.
Same.
And I think I topped out like at 22 movies.
That's really impressive. Because last time I spoke to you, you were like 12.
Right, yeah.
And I was like, really? Because I've watched 30. And in the end, I watched 37.
Zan.
Yeah.
Color me impressed. So do you want me to go first?
Yes,
okay.
I do, actually.
Okay, so I have to say that there's a lot of good movies she's done. I found myself surprisingly engaging with a lot of these movies. Mildred Pierce, which is the movie that she won her Oscar for, is very, very good.
It is. It's really good. And they changed stuff from the book.
Right.
It's funny because it was remade a couple of years ago by Todd Haynes for HBO. And like, I had not read the book, and I was like, nobody kills anybody.
Right, yeah. but what I love is like this Mildred Pierce, they add in this murder subplot, but I like it.
Yeah.
And I didn't watch the new version, but
I have a funny story. My sister and my mom will never listen to this, so I just I watched the new Mildred Pierce with them. And there's a scene in which Guy Pearce goes down on Kate Winslet, and it's not very long. And my mom literally just goes like, no, my sister was the one, and she was like, oh yeah, like it would be that quick. And my mom's like, yeah, it's never that quick. And I was like, like, no, ladies, no.
I'm choking. Oh my God. I know too much about your family, Gavin.
Sashay away.
Sashay away. I really like Mildred Pierce, but I don't think that was my top movie. I loved Humoresque.
I love Humoresque, yeah.
But then I realized I think I like it, but she's not like the star of it.
Right.
She's there, but she's not like, the reason why I love that was not because of her.
Yeah.
There's nothing very strange about me. I was married twice before, once at 16, once at 21. One was a crybaby and the other was a caveman. Between the two of them, I said goodbye to girlhood.
I love The Women a lot. I rewatched that. That's what I had watched
and
before.
She's not a huge role in that, and I forgot how not late in her career is, but it's later in her career than I thought, because it's not a huge role.
That is peak bitchy Joan Crawford. Like, she delivers the iconic line.
Well, girls, looks like it's back to the perfume counter for me. And by the way, there's a name for you ladies, but it isn't used in high society, outside of a kennel. So long, ladies.
As Crystal Allen, she's the best. But my pick, and the reason why The Women isn't my pick because it ends in a really weird way. My pick is her earlier Possessed.
Oh, the first one?
The first Possessed.
Okay. Oh, that's another interesting thing about Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford was in 2 different movies named the same thing.
Right.
Years apart, because there's the 1947 Possessed, and then there's the 1931 Possessed with Clark Gable.
And I'm choosing the 1931 Possessed. This is pre-code.
Yes.
And it was crazy because, like, I mean, when you find these movies, like, they're not in great quality.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, I don't know if I can, like, hear everything. But the story is so good. And, so Possessed essentially is, she is, like, she's a poor girl living in, like, a mill town, like, and she's a factory worker.
Yeah.
And she, a dude who also works in the factory wants to, like, marry her, and she's like, I want to do other shit. She's like...
That's a pretty word for word.
Like, literally, she's like, and do what? Marry you and, like, be here forever? Boo, bye. I want to go, like, get lit, get rich, like, have fun. And she literally meets a stranger, at a bar.
Say, what do you do in this godforsaken spot?
Work in a paper box factory.
Oh, go on. Nothing like you ever came out of a paper box.
But I mean to get away.
Ooh, naughty, naughty. Off the big city to be done wrong by?
To be done right by.
Now, is that a nice way to talk? Don't tell me you're not a country maiden with a heart of gold beating beneath your flannel nightie. Oh, I can't bear it. Come on, you must have a drink and complete my ruin.
What is it?
Who cares?
The label says champagne.
But you can't drink the label.
Getting wasted, and he's like, oh, I'm from New York. Like, it's the best. You should come, like, whenever. It's super cool. And so she just decides to just, like, take off. She goes and sees him, and he's just like, who are you? What? And she, like, and he just tells her, okay, well, here's the advice I give you. Like, find a man who's got lots of money and who can, like, take care of you. And that's how you make it in society. And she essentially smeagles her way into, like, snooty upper class and starts, like, seeing this guy who... Is he a widow? I can't remember.
I think he is. A widower.
Yes, right.
Black widow.
A black widow. And they carry on this relationship. They don't get married. To protect her reputation, though, they tell everyone that she's a widow, and she's, like, living off money from her dead husband, but they're basically fucking and having lots of fun on the DL. And she makes a name for herself in society.
There's so many great scenes between them. Like, she really did have so much chemistry with Clark.
Yeah, it's insane. And he then is like some big, like, states person wants to make him governor or run for something, and
senator, I think.
Yeah. But they'd say, you know, you're gonna have to get rid of that girl because people are gonna talk. And she overhears this conversation where he's like, no, I'm not gonna do it. Like, I love her. I'm not going to run for this. Like, and she overhears it. And because she loves him so much, she lies to him and says, I don't want you. I don't need you. Go away. Bye with you. And so he runs and he's heartbroken. And there's a great ending scene where, his competitors are trying to, like, fuck with him and, like, fake news him and whatever.
Yeah.
And they throw out a bunch of, like,
flyers with her name.
Yeah.
Like, who is,
whatever her name was, Miss Hollandale or whatever. And so they're like, who is this woman? And blah.
I'll answer that question. She's nothing to Mark Whitney.
Yeah? Well, how do you know?
I am Mrs. Morland. I was in his life once, but I'm not in his life anymore. He belongs to you, all of you who are here tonight.
Yeah? Well, he don't belong to me. Me neither.
No, of course not, because you were hired by his enemies to play this contemptible trick. Men who can be bought and sold have no claim on Mark Whitney. After all, what is this crime they've unearthed against him? Is he a murderer, a thief, or a liar? No, worse. He loved a woman, and she loved him.
Do you want to tear his heart open? Do you want to pry into its deepest secrets? Well, you don't have to. I'll tell you what's in it. Everything that was fine and honest and chivalrous that he did for a woman. How many of you could get off so easily? How many of you could face the white light of publicity? Could you and you and you and you? Be honest, men and women. Don't let the cowards rob you. Mark Whitney belongs to you. Keep him.
She's like, and who cares? We're in love. We're having fun. Like, we're fucking and it's awesome, guys. This man's cool. Vote for him. And then,
I'd like your Adore Delano version of that.
Yes. I mean, guys, party. But it's such a fun movie, and seeing her kind of like a lot of these movies are about like a trick or, you know, being someone who you're not or trying to fit in. And so this is a classic of that, but also they are, you know, it's not like where she's like, oh, I love you so much, please marry me. Like a lot of her movies are that also.
Yeah.
And this movie just dispenses with that because they didn't have to like live up to any fucking moral code where it's like they needed to be this type of couple.
There's a lot of really great pre-code movies, but that one is probably the highlight of those specific.
And it's funny because I wrote down everything I watched and I was like, okay, I liked this, and I revisited all of them and I was like, oh wait, I really fucking liked this. And a lot of the movies that I do like of hers, some of them still give me pause where I'm like, oh, well, like, they punish her for doing XYZ in this movie.
Right.
Like, she ends up going back to the guy who cheated on her in that movie. I'm like, oh, and that's a sign of the times of the movies that are made, of course, but this movie doesn't really fall into any of that.
Yeah, it's not judgmental, really.
It's not judgmental at all. She makes her own decision where she's like, you know what? I am going to remove myself from this relationship to help better my partner who I really care for. And then when he's confronted by it, and people who are asking about him, she's like, you know what? Fuck all this. I'm gonna like stand up and do what I want to do. And so, from the beginning to the end of that movie, she is, firm in her stance where she's like, I want more. And I want more and I'm not gonna be punished for wanting more. Which happens to her a lot in other movies, which is sad.
No, I like that. That's a really good choice and a very unexpected one.
Thank you, Gavin.
Because we both watched so many movies, I knew it was going to have to be unexpected. I did also have humoresque really up top. I think part of what's great about humoresque is it's so over the top it's from 1946 and
that
like
music.
It's like wall-to-wall classical music. She's like constantly smoking. Everything's shot through something, like shot through a glass, shot through smoke. Like she's wearing glasses. She doesn't give a fuck.
Yeah.
Like,
there's a great featurette on how they made the main actor who I thought was so dreamy in that movie.
And he died like shortly there afterwards.
Really?
Yeah. He died at the age of 29. It's John Gavin, right? Or no, not John Gavin. No. John Garfield.
That sounds right. He's like such like a manly.
Yeah, he died in the apartment of a female friend in her bed, even though he was married to somebody else.
Dramatics.
She claimed to be sleeping on the couch when it happened, but
okay, Chicago. I've seen this before.
Exactly, but he wasn't wearing clothes, and
the humoresque is about a violinist, and there's incredible like violin playing, and they essentially had him put his arms behind his back and had a professional, like one of the best in the world. They had to do a lot of tricky shooting. I'm like fucking violining. No one can see me. It's fine.
Everybody knows you're miming.
Yeah, I once played violin once. And that's true. And yeah, the movie's just really, really good. But I don't think she's the star of it. She's a big part of it, but she's not like.
Well, I mean, she doesn't even show up for the first 40 minutes.
Right. It's about the guy and him playing music.
I'm gonna pick one that I think that you may disagree with, which is fine. But I'm curious because you actually just mentioned you watched it earlier, and I don't think it's, as I've said before, like I try to pick things that are out of convention, and I do really think she's great in Mildred Pierce. She's really great in Sudden Fear, which is something else she was nominated for Best Actress for, and nobody makes films like that anymore, and I highly recommend going out and seeing that. But I really liked a film I watched really late called Daisy Kenyon.
Oh.
And the thing I thought was interesting about that is, as I mentioned before about her acting, this was 1947.
Mm-hmm.
This was sort of the return to the height of, like, big acting for her. But not the height, because she gets even bigger. Like, she basically starts chewing scenery in the 50s. But the thing that I liked about Daisy Kenyon was it was her first really small performance in about a decade. And Daisy Kenyon's a very, very simple movie.
Yeah.
It's Otto Preminger directed it. She bought the right. She tried to buy the rights to it initially, and the studio had already purchased it. So she recommended Otto Preminger direct it. It's her and it's Henry Fonda and Dana Andrews. And it's a love triangle between them. She's fucking Dana Andrews, who's a lawyer who's married with kids, and his wife is abusive towards the kids, which I was
crazy,
super surprised about. Did not think that was going to carry through as like a plot line, but it was.
Yeah, but it does.
And she gets stood up by Dana Andrews, and she meets Henry Fonda, who's a veteran of the war. He's just come back from War II. And his wife has passed away, and he's like still in love with the ghost of his wife, sort of, but he's also like a super gentleman, and he like proposes to her on their second date, which is insane. And she ends up like realizing like this relationship with this married man not going anywhere.
You're never going to be divorced because you don't want to be. Believe me, I'm not being sorry for myself. I knew it would be like this. It's just that I'm tired, that's all. Tired and through.
She marries Henry Fonda. Maybe not the best idea. Maybe not in the best mental state.
Don't they do this whole dance where they're both like, he knows that she is in love with Dan, right?
Right.
And they both are kind of like...
And she flat out says, you're in love with your dead wife.
Yeah, and they both are just kind of like, well, I guess one day we'll learn to like not love other people.
And it sort of goes on from there, and there's a back and forth. There's an attempted sexual assault trigger warning.
There is.
Which, once again, was really shocking for 47. And, like, it's not graphic by any means. Like, there's nobody's even out of their clothes. But it's shocking when it occurs because you're not expecting it from that time period. And it's emotional.
But yeah, because they're built up to be these really good friends.
Right.
And they, even after she has married and he goes back to his wife, they're still, like, good friends and hanging out.
And Dana Andrews attempts to rape her. Yeah. And, like, she fights him off and then cries, and you really feel for a moment like, shit, like I just watched something real that I shouldn't have been party to.
Yeah, you're right. I remember watching that and I was like, it's not shocking in like, you know, fucking see rape on TV all the time, but like, you're right.
There's an entire Law and Order that's been running for 20 years.
Right, literally.
Yeah.
But you're right, in the context of these movies, like, I had never seen, like,
and it's post-Hays Code. Like,
you always see, like, when the guy, like, grabs the girl and kisses her, she eventually gives in, and it's, like, lovely.
And that happens in a couple of her films, too. It's funny that rape, actually, the term rape was never used in a film until Otto Preminger's Anatomy of Murder.
Wow.
So it's another Otto Preminger. So, essentially, in the end, Dana Andrews comes to her and he's like, I'm divorcing my wife. My wife wants to make our affair very much similar to your, he's like, she's going to drag your name through the mud. And she's kind of like, I don't care. Let's do this. And because of that, Henry Fonda's kind of like, well, I guess this has run its course.
Right.
Like, I guess I'm, you helped me. I helped you. Like, we're done. And then the sort of like, there's a back and forth and there's a car crash. I don't want to give too much away because I highly recommend it. It's on Filmstruck if you want to go watch it. But the love triangle has a really satisfying resolution. But I think the thing I liked the most about it was I really, really loved her performance because it was so subtle and it was in a time in which she wasn't doing as much subtle work. Cause you look at Mildred Pearson, it's really great, but she is kind of big.
Right.
She's kind of like doing her like, Veda, I'm your mother, sort of. And there's none of that. It's this very quiet, it's a very modern way to make a film that is essentially a very old melodrama.
For sure.
It's a very modern film for its time. I'm recommending this against caution because I will say, in the end, no one liked the movie. It's since been reevaluated by a lot of critics and even some like really professional critics have named it as one of their favorite films. But like Otto Preminger did an interview in the 70s where he said he literally didn't remember making the movie. And Joan Crawford was asked about the movie late in her career and she said, oh yeah, that one's a real stinker. Had Otto not directed it, nobody would have cared. So like, I mean, but I think what it is I think like our context has changed for that style of movie. It's very simple and just very well done. And I really love the way Otto was a beast. He's a jerk, but like he could direct a movie. Like,
ask me what I wrote down next to that.
Please tell me what you wrote down next to Daisy Kenyon because you mentioned it on the walk here and I was like, oh, he's going to hate this.
I wrote 3 words. boring love triangle.
See? But that's the thing. Like, I think, like, I think you either get invested in it or you don't, and I can't blame you for that.
It's just like in this, like I told you, all these movies were bleeding together for me, and a lot of the movies are like a twist, murder, like, and so, I think I do like my Joan a little bit unhinged. I like her.
And she's really great when she's unhinged. We talked about Straight Jacket, which is like one of William Castle's movies, and she's really fantastic in that movie.
I love it.
Leave me alone! You let go of me! Listen to me!
Just call me Lucy. I wouldn't like my little girl to think I was trying to take her fellow away from her.
Carol and Michael are going to be married! And nobody's gonna stop it!
Queen Bee is another movie that I really enjoyed her performance in. It's essentially like knockoff Tennessee Williams. It's Cat on a Hot Tin Roof if she were playing Big Papa. Or Big Daddy. Sorry. Big Daddy.
Oh, Eva.
You should have been here. Beauty's been making decisions all by himself. About Carol and Judd. They're getting married right away.
Oh, that's wonderful. I was hoping they wouldn't wait. Oh, I'm so happy for them. I don't know what...
She can be really good, Big, but I don't know, to me it felt like much more of a return to sort of what she was doing in the 30s, but with a more 40s pressure on it to be like the good girl.
Right.
And whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, I forgot to mention Joan winning her Oscar for Mildred Pierce, and how she was so extra that she did not even go to the Academy Awards.
No, she laid up in bed.
And she will tell the story. There's interviews of her saying how she was sick, and the doctor said she couldn't go. But a lot of people say that she was too nervous. And she was too nervous because, and so she literally was laid up in bed. She wins the Oscar and she got it, had delivered. And as soon as she had it, she like opened her house to all of, you know.
And in Christina Crawford's version, she's neither. She was just trying to make a scene. So, I mean, any which way, it's so extra. She like literally, there's a famous picture of her in bed holding her Oscar.
Yes.
Like,
she invited all these reporters and photographers to be like, because, I mean, can you imagine, like, she's even said, you don't understand what these Oscars mean to us.
Yeah.
My doctor was with me, sitting on me. Literally holding me down in the bed. Because I was ready to get out and go because I had received the nomination and I was so grateful. I don't think the public knows what that Oscar means to us. It is one of the most emotional things that can ever happen to a human being.
Why do you think it is? Because it comes from your colleagues or what?
It comes from the people who work with us and who work in the same industry. We are chosen by them, not the public.
She didn't have a profession. She had a life. And
yeah,
maybe that's
literally. We haven't even talked about Baby Jane though.
No, we haven't.
Do we care to mention Baby Jane?
Listen, Baby Jane is its own thing. I think if you're going to talk about Baby Jane more than anything, you need to really talk about Betty Davis. Betty Davis is the one that's pulling the face in that movie. But it's fine. It's fine. It's a little overrated, and the people think.
I watched it and I was like, that's it?
Yeah. It's more well known because of the feud between them. You know, and that's she rarely spoke about the feud, but she did one time mention it briefly.
I'm sure you must get very bored by the constant fiction that you and Bette Davis are positively daggers drawn.
She'd kill you if she heard you say Bet. She's a fascinating actress, Betty Davis. I've never had time to be friends with her because we only did the one picture.
Well, watch Baby Jane and judge for yourself, audience. But like,
I mean, it's certainly like very interesting and like, you know, birthed this new movie style. And
and also Robert Aldrich was like a seasoned director at the time, and he did a lot of really interesting things with that movie. And but you know, not every performance can be amazing, especially in a 50-year career. So we should probably talk about our least favorites.
My 1-star review goes to Autumn Leaves.
Oh, really? Which is also Robert Aldrich.
Really?
Yeah.
So
I you know,
did you like it?
I do like it, but I'll let you spill your tea and then
let me spill the tea. So what did I write down? I I watched this very recently, and I literally wrote down, oldish woman falls for a youngish dude. It's essentially like, I think this story is supposed to be trying to tell us about, essentially her character has kind of given her life to taking care of her father who is dying, and she like has a landlord lady who is like a spinster, and like, I think we're supposed to be learning this lesson about, if you're an old lady and not getting married, like, you're wasting your life away.
Oh, that's interesting.
And
you took that message, like...
Oh, and also this movie, I think, is all over the place. At the beginning of the movie, she meets this guy. Essentially, she's like, oh, well, I have to go to this show alone because I have no one, blah. And, it's kind of like, I felt very attacked because I do that often. And she goes and she meets this dude at a restaurant. He just wants to sit down and eat, and they end up flirting, and she's at first kind of like, no, girl, I'm not about it.
Yeah.
But he like is persistent, and
played by Cliff Robertson, who, from modern context, most of you will know him as Uncle Ben from the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies.
He was cute.
Yeah, he's good looking. I met him shortly after the first Spider-Man movie. And I felt really bad because I was like, I knew he'd done a bunch of Westerns, and I was like, oh, I love your movies. And he was like, oh, you mean like Spider-Man? And I was like, no, I really like a lot of your Westerns. And I didn't put it and I have a picture with him. I didn't put it together. I was wearing a fucking Spider-Man shirt at the time.
Gavin,
so of course he thought that.
You're embarrassing yourself.
Exactly.
And at the beginning of this movie, I thought it was going to be a whole like, oh no, because she's like, no, please go away. Like, I'm too old for you.
Oh, Melly.
Good night.
Good night.
Bert, please don't come back anymore.
What?
I mean it. Don't come back.
Gibbs,
Find a girl your own age. There must be plenty of them. It's a big city.
Oh, now listen, Millie.
You're just lonesome, that's all. All right, I'm lonesome too. But we can't have loneliness pushing us together because it wouldn't keep us together. Just loneliness reaching out for loneliness. I'm used to being alone.
That isn't it at all.
If you knew a girl your own age, you wouldn't want me. And that isn't fair. So please, before things get any more complicated, please, I mean it.
They end up getting married because she's like, fine, like, I love you, blah. But then it takes a hard turn into like psychosis and mental health. And
he's a pathological liar who has possibly schizophrenic tendencies.
His ex-wife comes into town.
Right.
And is like, oh, did you know that he's a lying liar who lies? And
she's like fucking his dad, though, right?
And so, thank you, Gavin. The twist is like she and the dad, like they're spinning this tale of like how he's a liar and he needs help, and they need paperwork done to get like land from him, but then it turns out the dad and the wife are fucking, and he apparently is scarred and is a liar because he caught them fucking.
Right.
And what's happening to me?
You're so caught up.
I'm caught. Yes.
You're like, I'm gonna become a liar because I caught them fucking too.
and he becomes violent towards Joan Crawford's character. He throws a typewriter on her hand.
Yeah. I did not like that.
And she, she tries to take care of him, and eventually she sends him away to get help from a mental institution. There's a very long and bizarre, like, montage scene where they're, like, shocking his brain and, like, all that garbage, like, not real science.
Well, she's, like, living her life alone.
Right. And she's fighting with, like, the husband and, not the husband, the dad and the wife, because they need the papers. And she's like, no, I love him still. And eventually, like, literally the movie just ends with him being like, after all that awful, terrifying, shocking stuff, I'm better, and that's it, right? They kiss in the garden outside of the mental hospital, and that's the end of the movie.
I think I ended up liking it more for Cliff Robertson's performance because I had not seen him in a role like that, and I did think he was really charming and really convincing at the beginning, and really great when, like, you find out that he's been, like, lying and...
Right.
I mean, it gets... The ending, all the stuff that happens towards the end is incredibly extreme, and It's a part, like, I was like, oh, there's gonna be a twist where he's, not what he seems. Okay. Yeah. But then it was like double twist, and I was like, oh, this is trying so hard to be, like, extra, or, like, really, I would have been fine with him, like, being a manipulative liar and her learning that, like, she doesn't need a man. Like, that would have been a fine story. But then to add this whole thing where, like, he was so scarred about, by this
really awful thing, which, like, sure, but to the point where he's, like, crying and beating up on ladies and lying and stealing, I was like, all right, like, this is enough. What's your 1-star review?
So my 1-star review actually isn't, like, super early in her career. I thought I might find something really early in her career that I didn't like. And I did see some of the silence. Actually, one of the best is The Unknown, which is, like, one of the best silence. It's her and Lon Chaney, and Lon Chaney was just a fucking maniac. Anyways, but there's this 1942 film called They All Kiss the Bride.
Oh, and I did not watch this one. What is it about? Just don't do it?
It's garbage.
Okay.
It's directed by Alexander Hall. And it's essentially, she's a tough business owner. She runs a fleet of, a trucking company, right? And, oh god, I feel like maybe I pushed some of this out of my head because I hated it so much.
What was it called again?
They All Kiss the Bride.
They All Kiss the Bride. Okay.
Here's the synopsis. Margaret Drew runs her trucking company single-mindedly, if not ruthlessly. The only thorn in her side is writer Michael Holmes, who's writing a book on some of her tough ways. With no time for men, the effect an attractive stranger has on her at her sister's wedding is unnerving. When it turns out that this is the hated writer, she starts seriously to lose her bearings. Surely it can't become Maggie and Mike. So this guy is a fucking asshole.
A fucking asshole?
Yeah, he's the worst. He's played by Melvin Douglas, who, it's funny, she was in a movie before that was a huge box office bomb. But she recommended him. The making of this movie was already pretty turmoil, because, it was originally set to star Carole Lombard.
Mm-hmm.
Carole Lombard had died in a plane crash, in January of 1942. Joan Crawford had replaced her. When the film was, completed, she ended up contributing her salary to the American Red Cross in Lombard's name, which is really nice for her. But she was on loan from Columbia Pictures, on loan to Columbia Pictures from MGM, because Carole Lombard was a friend of hers, because Carole Lombard very famously was married to, Clark Gable at the time of her death, and actually drove Clark Gable into the army.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a long, complicated thing. But, the funny thing is when she was, loaned to Columbia, they retailored the script for her. And during this time period, there was a lot of, there's a very specific style of comedy called screwball comedy, which is sort of a reaction to slapstick comedy. Slapstick comedy is sort of like Three Stooges, like a lot of pies in the face, a lot of poking each other in the eyes and stuff. And screwball comedies was a lot of like fast talking, a lot of like back and forth, the sort of His Girl Fridays, the bringing up babies. You know, there's physical comedy, but it's not as like violent towards the other person. It's more,
witty?
Witty. And sharp and fast.
Okay.
And,
Gilmore Girls?
Yeah. Don't get me started on that. I have a whole theory about how...
I'm so sorry. I am so sorry.
How screwball comedy was reinvented for television in the 90s. Anyways, the problem is that's just not who Joan Crawford was. Joan Crawford could be funny, but she wasn't that kind of funny. And in retelling the script for her, like, the lines are... None of it's funny. It's incredibly sexist. The Melvin Douglas character, the writer, like, has no business judging this woman who runs her own fucking business.
By my long gray beard, I've got it. I've got why you always have a desk in front of you. Why you have detectives standing outside the door. Why you torture your truck drivers in such delicate little ways. Why you drive your staff around with that hypothetical bullwhip. You're afraid of men. Oh, yes, you are, Maggie. You're afraid of them. And you're determined to make the world an unsafe place for men to live in.
Oh, let's stop this nonsense, you...
Sticks and stones, Maggie. Sticks and stones.
But she's treated, like, the entire movie like, what the hell is wrong with this bitch? Like, this movie has a lot of those moments where, like, he grabs her and she tries to fight him and eventually gives up. There is one funny scene, that I did enjoy. There's a scene earlier in the film where they go and they do, they swing dance together, which she could dance.
Yes.
And this is the early 40s. You hadn't seen her dance on screen for at least, like, 5 years, you know? And later she's like remembering it in her office and she like starts to like Lindy Hop alone. Like, and then somebody catches her and she has to be like, oh no, I'm a businesswoman.
Right.
Like, and that was the one funny thing that happens in the movie. But like, yeah, the movie is just a complete sexist disaster. I know she was doing it as a favor, but it feels like she doesn't want to be in it.
Right.
And I mean, it was her friend who passed away, so I could see her, definitely not. It never got favorable reviews. Melvyn Douglas is terrible in it. She's not great either.
You're like, it's terrible here, terrible there.
Yeah, and there's a reason it's mostly forgotten. And like, it's not even fun. Some of these movies that I would like to recommend some other movies that like are bad but are fun, like Flamingo Road.
Right.
That's her in like Sydney Greenstreet. She plays a woman who's dating it's another politician.
I put Circus Lady Falls for Sheriff.
Yes, exactly.
Field's going to the state senate. One of these days, he's going to be governor. A man like that's got to get married. Stay married. Happily married.
That's fine, but I've got a right to live, too.
You know, when I was a young fellow, I once had a job at a warehouse. There were rats there. I didn't pay no attention to them. One night, though, I went to sleep, and a rat near half chewed my big toe off before I knew what was happening. After that, I went around and plugged up all the holes. As long as I kept the holes plugged, I didn't have nothing to worry about. That's how I kept my toes all these years.
I won't be run out of town this way.
And Sydney Greenstreet, who's like a crime boss, like tries to drive her out of town, and she comes back to get her revenge. And Sydney Greenstreet's great and is very
twisty,
drawl. That one is one I would recommend. That's not good, but like the performances are great. The other one, Female on the Beach. Female on the Beach is a movie where it's just fucking bad wall to wall, but so much fun. It's a noir.
It's like ridiculous. Where it's like
a young quote unquote young. He's gray, but like a young man like tries to seduce her for his money.
Yeah, because his aunt and uncle like are using.
Yeah, they're con people.
Yeah, it's weird because also at the end they like find another boy to like start using.
Yeah,
I'm like,
I know. I actually like midway through the movie, I was like, I don't think they're really his aunt and uncle.
Right. I was like, wait,
they sort of
they collect hot men to seduce rich women,
yes,
for their money,
and there's like a big twist at the end, and it's a lot of fun and really stupid. But it's also like a really bad movie.
It's ridiculous, for sure.
Was there any ones that you would like recommend just on that while we're still doing bad ones? But yeah, so I guess that would be.
I think that's it.
Yeah, we should move into our fast forward. Real quick, I mentioned earlier we talked about Mommy Dearest. Mommy Dearest is a film made out of the book that written by her daughter about Joan Crawford's alleged abuse of her. It's an 80s film. It stars Faye Dunaway as Joan Crawford. And I just wanted to say, it seems in modern context, most people, when they think of Joan Crawford, that's what they're thinking.
They go to that,
the Faye Dunaway performance. That's not fair. Yeah. It's really not fair. It's very over the top. Bette Davis, classic Feud with Joan Crawford, even said when interviewed about Mommy Dearest, she said, Faye Dunaway deserves to be in an institution, and I don't mean marriage. So, like, she was very loyal to her dead frenemy.
Right.
And like, I'll be perfectly honest, I love Mommy Dearest, but I don't watch it as an accurate portrayal of what happened. And,
it's entertainment.
Yeah, exactly. It's become a cult classic. John Waters does the commentary on the DVD. Highly worth listening to. Also, we mentioned, Feud earlier. Right. Feud, Bet and Joan, Ryan Murphy's TV series. Spoiler alert, particularly hate Ryan Murphy. I think he's a trash monger. I don't understand how he keeps getting TV shows. I am happy he did this one. I did watch the whole thing. I didn't particularly like it. I think Susan Sarandon did a really great job.
As Joan?
As Betty.
Oh, she's Betty.
I did not think Jessica Lange did a good job as Joan Crawford. I think if you're a Joan Crawford fan and you watch her films, one of the things that's really apparent is how strong of a person. And admittedly, they're trying to do the private Joan Crawford, but she spends she plays her as Jessica Lange. She spends a lot of it kind of weepy and a lot of it kind of like
broken.
She shows that vulnerable side in a way that,
do you think it reads false?
Yeah. And I felt really bad because I don't want to say that she didn't deserve an Emmy nomination, but to me, it just wasn't, she wasn't doing Joan Crawford. And,
I mean, it's funny because everyone was like, oh, you're doing Joan Crawford, like, you should watch Feud. I was like, listen, I have to watch, like, 80 fucking films. I'd rather watch actual Joan Crawford than, like, put time in to watch a thing that's, like about Joan Crawford. And I'm like, wow, people really, really have opinions.
People want to hate her. And I will be honest, part of it is that thing that you know, like, people began sort of seeing the real determined Joan Crawford at the end and began just casting her as the bitch.
Right.
And like, I think that's colored a lot of the impression of the previous generations before us. And that's why, like, the generation that we have now, their frame of reference is Mommy Dearest. So it's like, you know, even watching when they did All Stars and they Drag Race and,
Alyssa Edwards.
Alyssa Edwards did. It was very clear the only thing she knew about Joan Crawford was Mommy Dearest.
Right.
And, like, that was sort of upsetting. And, like, when they did Feud, there was a lot of, like, there's obviously a lot of references to their career. But for some reason, there was, when it came to Joan Crawford, like, there was a scene where she's, like, sitting in a boardroom, and Ryan Murphy had her dressed the same way that the character Joan Crawford is dressed in Mommy Dearest. And it's like, this isn't related to that. Like, this isn't, but that's also part of the reason why I hate Ryan Murphy, is because he's never had an original idea in his life.
Also, even like, not to be super gay, but Mariah, seasons ago did her, and again, it was just like the big eyebrows and more wire hangers, and like, it's just...
And that's what people know about her. And to me, that's a little sad, because she is a much more three-dimensional person.
Yeah.
And she did have a sad, like, it wasn't an easy beginning, it wasn't an easy end for her.
But I think so prolific.
She was so prolific, and I think she was really tough, and that's why, you know, if I am being honest, I do believe she was probably not great to her children. But I
wonder if like the proliferation of television and the more that she, like, the more access the world got to her, the mythos of her kind of diminished.
Yeah.
And people were able to not just like fill in the blanks of like a starlet, you know, and kind of, they were able to see her more, and they were like, oh, she is kind of XYZ. And so, I mean, it's kind of like, it's celebrities today, you know, like you can tweet at them and it's whatever, you know, and, I just wonder if she was better served by having mystery, and like you'd see her at the you know, at the Oscars or her debuts and on screen, and
she did do some shitty things, like the whole thing. Feud talks about the time that she called up all the other Oscar winners for the year that Joan Crawford was nominated, and she wasn't.
Betty was Crawford.
Oh, yeah. Betty was nominated.
Betty was nominated for Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and Joan wasn't, and allegedly she was furious.
Yeah.
Didn't do any press for the movie, and decided to call up literally every other nominee and asked if any of them won, she could accept it on their behalf, and
it was Anne Bancroft, I believe.
Yeah. And they all, and what's shitty is they all agreed.
Yeah.
And so Joan Crawford sure did get up there.
The way they played it in the other thing about Feud is, like, it's one sad hour after another, which is sort of, I like the stuff when they talk about Baby Jane, but like post that, it's literally like watching just the most depressing thing. But it was nominated for 18 Emmys, which is a lot of Emmys. So it'll be interesting to see what it wins. That just happened this past week. Also, I did want to bring up just one thing. And this is in Feud. Betty Davis famously was quoted by a newspaper, that they called her up and they wanted to ask about Joan Crawford's death. And her famous quote was, you know, you should never say bad things about the dead, only good. Joan Crawford is dead. Good. And so, like, but I think that was Betty Davis staying in the headlines.
Right.
You know, like, that's, I don't know. Their feud is really interesting, but it's not the most interesting part of Joan Crawford, and it certainly is not the most interesting part of Betty Davis.
Right. Totally.
But yeah, I'm glad we were able to tackle a classic thing, because it is very different than doing the other things. And plus, we're still early on in this podcast, so we're sort of discovering new things we can do with it. And
this was really fun.
But if you'd like us to do more classic things, or you want us to go back, if you did not like this at all, and want us to go back to more modern stuff, feel free to contact us. You can find us online at Twitter at The Mixed Reviews.
On Facebook, just type in The Mixed Reviews.
You can email us at reviewsmixed@gmail.com.
Also, let us know. I mean, there are so many movies.
Yeah.
I certainly didn't watch even half of them.
I didn't even 37 movies out of an 82 movie career. Yeah. It's really, and I know some of her silent films are lost. So.
Right. So, but let us know what your favorite one is. We will put up a poll, this upcoming week. It'll be hard to like narrow it down to the top 4.
I know we're gonna have our 2, and then And it'll be interesting. And also, if you didn't like the fact that we didn't cover Baby Jane, come tell us. Come for us, man.
Drag ha.
But also, we're available on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music. So some of our episodes are up on SoundCloud. And if you subscribe to us, please rate and review us. It lets other people know about us, and the larger our audience is, the more interaction we have with you guys, and the more cool stuff we can do.
Yeah, tell me I'm pretty.
Yeah, well, you are.
Thank you.
We actually know who we're doing next week. Should we announce it just to see if anybody wants to play along at the home game, or should we keep it quiet?
I don't know. I mean, why not, right? It doesn't hurt. Let's see what happens. If it goes well, then maybe we'll do it again. If not, whatever.
So, in 2 weeks, you'll get a new episode from us.
Right.
That's all about...
Charlize.
Queen Charlize.
Miss Charlize herself, Theron.
It's funny, I actually just found an interview clip of her, like, saying how you actually pronounce her last name.
How is it?
Oh, I can't remember. I'm not. Please, I can't pronounce Smith. Like, how dare you ask?
Right.
But yeah, so we'll be back in 2 weeks with an episode about Charlize.
We're doing Charlize because Atomic Blonde is coming out, and we're both really pumped to go see that.
Absolutely.
And also, she is a queen.
Yeah, but Joan was great to us. So,
Joan was good to us, and I hope she's been good to you.
Absolutely.
Maybe you now see her in a softer light, maybe? I don't know.
She was, some of those later films were real soft light.
True. You're not wrong. All right, guys. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Though you hold me in your arms tonight, will tomorrow bring the same delight? Though we love each other, how long will it last? You are like a burning flame to me. Will you always be the same to me? Though I taste your kisses, how long will they last? Whatever you may do, this heart of mine is true. I still believe in you. Though love go past, with you happiness and bliss appear. All my troubles seem to disappear, yet my constant fear is how long will